So it's almost the end of 2019. You've made it. Do you have any big vacation plans, ways to wind down after a big IPO year?
No, the IPO was really energizing. So, you know, if you love what you do and you're doing something that's really changing lives, we took away a lot of energy from that, not just for myself, but for our leadership team and for all of our people, because after a almost 6-year journey, it was a great validation that, you know, the market recognized what we were doing and how we were making a difference. So no real plans yet. We'll see. We'll see after the year is over. We're now public, so your year starts January 1 as a public company.
Yeah. So I just want to back up a little bit. You know, in the video, and Danielle mentioned a lot about your background and kind of stuff, but I figured the room might want to know, maybe they already know, but I'm very curious. Who are you? Like, how did you get to this spot? How did you kind of get to Livongo as this company?
So I'm fortunate. I have a very kind of diverse background. So I was educated in 3 different places, at a little school called Bucknell University, a year at London School of Economics, and then over to Oxford at St. Antony's College for a degree in social anthropology. And so for probably more than 20 years, people have asked, what's a social anthropologist doing running a software company? And it turns out what I studied was how cultures change. And if you think about it, the fastest way to change any culture, as we've learned from Facebook and other organizations, is using software. But along the way, I spent a year living with the Amish with no electricity. And kind of for those of you who are old enough to remember the movie Witness, I was like Harrison Ford, but I didn't kill anybody. So that was a unique experience. And all that somehow led to running software companies and technology companies and ultimately Livongo. Livongo in particular, there was a kind of a unique factor, and that was that little guy you saw that looked like the movie character was actually my son, Sam, with the kind of thick glasses, and he was diagnosed with diabetes, and a lot of people, type 1 diabetes, and a lot of people think, oh, that's why you started the company. And the reality was not exactly, because Sam's been fortunate, he's had great care. But when he was diagnosed, I started to understand more about what diabetes meant for so many people, not just type 1, where there's about 2 million people in the US that have type 1, but type 2, another 30 million people have type 2. And I understood how hard we made it for people with chronic conditions like diabetes to stay healthy. And I was spending my life in using software to make everything else easier. We'll put an asterisk around electronic health records for a second. It's all a separate discussion. But that's what I was doing. I couldn't understand why we put so many hurdles in front of people who just wanted to feel better. And so just as an example, if you have diabetes, you prick your finger and you have to check your blood. Now there's CGMs as well, continuous glucose monitors, but most people still prick their finger. And we would have situations where we'd call up and our insurance company, we'd say, Sam is running out of strips. And they'd say, well, we can send you needles now, but we can't send you strips for another 2 weeks. And you'd kind of like say, are you crazy? Like, do you understand this? And the answer was, if it's an emergency, you should go to the ER. It's like, I'm in this business. That's a terrible answer. And, you know, and that still happens today. And so, you know, the beauty of Livongo was to create an experience that members actually love, that actually makes them healthier, and last but not least, costs less than the traditional way of doing it. So that's an abbreviated story of how I ended up here.
Right. And, you know, building on that a little bit, you know, obviously Livongo stock had a bunch of fanfare around the time it went public. Now it's trading a bit down, to put it lightly. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, I feel like as a reporter especially, we hear a lot about a company the day it IPOs, and then we kind of don't follow along as closely or pass it off to other teams. You know, as we see more companies start to think about going public, we are hearing that figure about 6 kind of waiting in the wings for 2020. Like, what should other founders kind of keep in mind now that you've done it a few times, but in particular on this round with Livongo? Sure. What should they know about those kind of first few months after going public? What's it like?
Well, I think there's two avenues to approach that question. One is, in the first year of a public company, there's always a settling period. And in particular with Livongo, we were creating a whole new category. So as we were out marketing the stock, we met with tech investors, and they said, oh, you're a SaaS company, recurring revenue, great, we know SaaS companies. We met with healthcare companies, they said, you're a healthcare company. Other companies thought we were a diabetes company. Our other investors thought we were a diabetes company. Some thought we were a device company because we have devices. We have coaches, we have data scientists. Some said, oh, you're a data science company. And the reality is we were creating this new category called applied health signals. So first we had to explain that to investors. And we look different than a lot of other companies because we are. So we've kind of created this new category. So that's number one. And we were fortunate, having taken other companies public before, that we prepared our team. In fact, there was this great quote of me saying, the best day of going public is the day you go public, and after that, it's all downhill. And that's not exactly true, but you do get thousands of new people who all assume they can tell you how to run your company better than you know how to run it. You have a variety of new metrics. You're living more quarter to quarter. And so there's some changes. And we were prepared for them. We said the stock is likely, it had this great run up. Then it came way down. Both were overcompensations. And now it's probably in an area that right around the IPO price. Anyone who would have believed that the company would be worth $2.5 to $3 billion at the IPO, that would have made people happy until it was worth more than that. And then they said, like you did, well, it's come down a lot. Well, from where? That said, the prospects for the company, this is the 90% of all costs in the US are related to chronic conditions. We now work not just in diabetes, but in hypertension, in weight management and diabetes prevention and behavioral health. Putting those four together, it's probably the best growth opportunity of all companies anywhere. And so from that standpoint, we have great visions for where the company can go. But I think you have to, my advice to somebody looking to go public is, first and foremost, you have to be ready. So we're blessed with recurring revenue and a 93% customer retention rate, which is up amongst the best in SaaS companies. So 96% client retention, 93% customer retention. So we know quarter to quarter where our revenue is, how we're growing, and that's going to continue. So we're very comfortable with that. So one, you have to be ready. We also have a world-class management team, and right before we went public, I asked Zane Burke, who was formerly president and COO of Cerner, to join us because, again, I understood that being a fast-growing public company in a new category, it was going to require a lot of attention, and so we wanted to make sure we were ready. So world-class management team. Then you have to ask yourself, why do you want to go public? And you can raise money privately today. That's not a challenge. So why did we do it? First and foremost, going public today is a branding event. So we wanted our customer base, whether it was the more than 20% of the Fortune 500 who are our customers today, they're more comfortable dealing with public company, another public company, because of the transparency and the like. Second, we wanted to make sure that people knew our intentions were to actually go forward. We weren't interested in selling the company or anything else. This is a long-term commitment for us. That was important. And then the added benefits are you do have a currency that you can use for acquisitions. And it didn't hurt that we added $400 million to the bank account. So all those things are helpful. On the flip side, you have to know how to manage a public company. And our intention is to continue to do the things we've been doing, continue to grow at the rate we're growing, and we'll see what happens.
Was there anything that came up in these past couple months that you hadn't prepared for?
I actually don't think so, and it's not because, there's no sense of arrogance there or anything else. I mean, the one thing that I think is a new variable for all of us is, Washington and tweets can impact the market in a way that I don't think has ever happened before. And so there's a new instability, and you can be having a great day and going along, and, somebody tweets something in Washington, and the next thing you know, the whole market's headed down. And so I don't think we've always had some influence from Washington, but never at that extent. Again, if you're looking at the long term, I'm not sure. I'm hoping that's just a temporary blip. But from that perspective, I think that's the only unique aspect of it. Our timing turned out to be perfect because literally 2 weeks after we went out, the market kind of shut down. And so we felt good about the timing, and we were fortunate.
Right, and I want to talk about that a little bit. This has been a really interesting year for IPOs in general. I hear from my tech colleagues, they followed, Uber and Lyft, and then obviously we saw what happened with WeWork and some of the other folks. So it's been one of those really interesting years where I feel like we've seen kind of a reckoning. And to your point, we talked a little bit about revenue and stuff like that. I've heard from a lot of folks that companies without kind of this revenue marker aren't going to make it public in a lot of ways. I'm curious what you think about that. Is that the case from where you sit?
Well, I think that with the instability of the markets generally, that there is more of a sense of we need to understand what your model is. Do you have a model that's sustainable? Do you have a plan to turn profitable at some point in the future? We do at Livongo, so that's been very good. From our standpoint, and we've demonstrated every quarter we've actually not just met but exceeded the numbers and raised guidance every quarter so far. So, that's going to be increasingly important. People aren't going to go with more speculative IPOs. I think WeWork was an aberration. It's simply a business that shouldn't have been valued at what it was valued at. It was somebody saying, we'll buy expensive space, rent it to you short term for lower rates, and the business never really made sense. So I think the other businesses, Uber and Lyft and businesses like that are fundamentally changing how we think about transportation, and they just need time to settle in. That's a very different kind of story. But I think good companies will continue to get public, but some of the companies that are on the cusp may not, or will get public at lower valuations. And you mentioned, a few really top companies that went out and paved the way even for us, even though we were maybe a little bit larger or a little more of a consumer digital health play. But there's already some, Health Catalyst and others are great companies.
Who else would you put in that camp? Who helped pave the way for you?
Well, I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think part of the reason that there was this run-up was I don't think there's many companies that have actually figured out how to use data to improve an experience in healthcare. So we hear a lot about AI, but the reality is very few people have actually been able to create that model. And, if you think about it, so think about what's changed, how the economy is organized. So, years ago, we used to, for some of the people in the room, they remember this thing called an encyclopedia, where you went and you actually, some people had them at home, and you got old information, but you had it. And then you could go to a library, but it was only open certain hours. And then along comes Google, and we have instant information 24 hours a day that keeps getting better. The more we use it, it gets better and better. In fact, there was this great quote recently I heard: the loneliest place in the world is the second page of a Google search. Now, that didn't used to be the case. I can remember going through multiple pages, but they've gotten so good at knowing what are you really looking for. So they organized content. And then the next big organization, and made billions of dollars doing it, the next big organization was Facebook. They came along and organized communities, so you could find people in your high school or grade school or family members. They made communication easy 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world. Now, there were some unintended side effects that showed how powerful the technology was, and that is you could spread information very quickly. You still have to figure that out, but nonetheless, they organized community, the second C. The third C was commerce, and I think we all know that story. If we wanted to order something right now, anything we wanted, not just books, we could have it here, and we could have it here in an hour. 24 hours a day, it's available to you. And so the last C, we believe, is care. And that is, why isn't care available 24 hours a day? Why isn't exactly what you need delivered to you, where you need it, when you need it? That's what our future healthcare system is going to be. And if you're using Livongo, that's what it is today. So our people can talk to somebody within 60 seconds, 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world. They get their supplies, their test strips and Lancets and other things for free. And the best companies like Target say to their members, their employees, if you use Livongo for hypertension and for diabetes, we'll actually eliminate your copays and we'll give you your meds for free, because we know that keeping you healthy actually makes good business sense. And I think that's the future of our healthcare system. And we're seeing that, for example, with telehealth. People now say, if I want to talk to a doctor at 1 in the morning, I should be able to talk to a doctor. And when I call, she answers, and she's awesome, and she tells me what to do. And then she tells me where to go to get my meds, because she already knows a 24-hour pharmacy. And that's beautiful. And people are actually willing to pay for that. And if you compare that to what they think of the normal payer experience, it's a pretty dismal comparison.
Right. And so when thinking about some of the other companies that could help build out that ecosystem, and as folks start to look at 2020 to go public, like what, from where you sit, could be the biggest stumbling block? Like, you know, it seems like the market was quite down this quarter. What would also kind of hit the other guys?
Well, people ask about our competitors, and our biggest competitor is the status quo. And so I think that's true when you go out and you want to work with, work within our healthcare system. Understand that the people buying the products are different than the people using the products. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 levels of differentiation, and that makes it hard. So when I first went out to Silicon Valley, the reason that Silicon Valley hasn't been successful in healthcare is because they're used to selling directly to all of us. And they didn't really understand the ecosystem. And the ecosystem isn't friendly to startups. They might say they're friendly, but they're not friendly. So the number of people in the ecosystem who tried to kill Livongo over the years is kind of legendary. I mean, for example, people make a lot of money of selling these test strips. And so they weren't happy that we said, we're just going to give them away, because we actually know how much they cost to make. It's not very expensive, and we want people just to be healthy, so we're going to give those away. Well, you can imagine what the big test strip companies wanted to do, and they're giving rebates to everybody who will take them. Rebates are really kickbacks, okay? Let's be honest. That's what they are. And so people are getting paid to get us to use more expensive products that aren't helpful. So when we came out and did this, there were a whole bunch of people who didn't like it. Luckily, we started with self-insured employers who said, look, we're tired of 20 and 30% increases every year. We want a healthcare system that works, that's cost-effective, that our people like, and that keeps them healthy. And so they were willing, out of frustration, to say, we're going to try this. And in many cases, they were told by payers and others, well, we're going to increase your rates if you use Livongo. Totally illegal. They were told that nonetheless. And they said, you know what? Like, try us, because we've been doing this for 20 years, and sorry, but you haven't solved the problem. And so they were willing to try it. And I think that's the case now. And if you look at, for example, what is Haven? Haven basically is Amazon, JP Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway getting together and saying, we have to create something new because the existing system isn't working for us. And that's pretty astounding that 3 of the largest, some would say smartest companies in the United States said the existing system isn't working for us. So what we were able to do at Livongo was ultimately partner with some of the most innovative pharmacy benefit managers who are looking to add value. So whether it's CVS or Express Scripts, they have visionary leaders who are saying, we're going to redefine healthcare in a consumer-oriented way, or some of the leading payers in the country. The Cambias led by Mark Gans and others who are really starting to redefine that in different ways. And Blue Cross Blue Shield, the association, again, doing some really innovative, great things.
It's interesting that you call the PBMs the innovative leading folks here, because I would have maybe considered them in that first camp of folks trying to tamp you down. But
well, I think in today's world we have friends, we have enemies, and we have frenemies. And on any given issue, somebody could be all three. You know, Amazon is a big customer of ours. We do product development with them, so we're available on Alexa and all kinds of other things, some of which I can't talk about. And then, on the other hand, maybe they'll get into our business, who knows? And so I think all you can do is focus on your member, keep working to deliver an incredible response that's an experience that's different than anyone else who's out there.
Sure. And I want to talk a little bit about, like you mentioned, you went out to investors and some kind of identified you as a diabetes company, but you're also in hypertension and you've made acquisitions in the behavioral health space. Like, when you think about, like, really quick, like, what's like the big picture view of what you guys are hoping to do? Is this like, do you anticipate like in 5 years we'll know you as a diabetes company?
Well, no, I hope not. I hope today most of our customers don't know us as they may know us as a diabetes company, but I think they think of us as a whole person company. And that is, people with chronic conditions can come to us have one experience, one tech stack, one set of coaches who really understand who they are and what they need. And this idea of consumer focus is really at the heart of what we do. When I often ask what your customer service people say they call up and they say, "Can I help you?" That seems like a reasonable response, right? Is everybody reasonable? So, but actually that's not, because if I say, "Can I help you?" that means you're helpless and I have the power. Instead, our people say, "What do you need?" So if I say to you, "What do you need?" now you're in charge. And sometimes you say, "Right now I don't need anything." The hardest thing for us was to convince our empathetic, wonderful, certified diabetes educators and coaches to say, "Okay, thank you," and hang up. Because they wanted to help. And they didn't know that the person didn't want their help at that point. So they aren't in charge. And that's our healthcare system in this country is something that's done to us. And what we're trying to do is flip that around and say, no, actually, you're going to be in charge. And all of these other people, and whether they be doctors, who I respect greatly and I think are underpaid, or whether they be all kinds of other healthcare organizations, they're going to be at the service of the person as opposed to the flip side. And right now we have it's kind of upside down.
Sure. And so when moving into these different business models too, I've been reading up a lot. I think we saw most recently with the Apple Watch study that came out, huge dropout rates from a clinical trial perspective. And I was just reading a meta-analysis of some of the, depression apps and things like that. There's also a massive dropout rate kind of associated with that. Yeah, it's not great. Have you guys seen similar things, and like how do you work to combat?
So again, the great news is we haven't. So we have a 93% client retention, 96% client retention, 93% member retention. So when people start using us, unless they leave the company or whoever's covering them, they just keep using it. And the reason is we make their life easier. We eliminate copays. Their strips arrive. If they lose their meter, they get one FedEx the next day. All the hurdles are taken away, and we're there whenever they need us. But we aren't randomly calling them in the middle of the day saying, "How are you doing?" All the mistakes that other people make. So we're very intently, some would say obsessively focused on the experience that our members have. And that's really the big difference. And I think some of these, this isn't a device. That's part of what we're happy to take information from Apple or Fitbit or Samsung watches or CGMs. We have a great partnership with Abbott. And all that information we'll take in, or pharmacy benefit information or electronic health record. It goes into our engine, and our engine it's aggregating information. It's then interpreting that to say what's going to work for you, which is different than what's going to work for me. Then we apply it back, we deliver it back to you, and last but not least, we see if it works. And that same model is what's used by all of the successful internet companies. Never really been used in healthcare. And if we think about why didn't Watson Health work, it's because they were great at aggregating. They bought lots of companies. They were really good at interpreting what does it mean for you, but then they couldn't close the loop. They couldn't see, well, but here's what it means. but did it work? That's why Amazon, for me, they're so frustrating because they send me this list of books and they say, here's the books you really need to read. And they get it right. And then I say, oh my gosh, I got to read all these books. Then I buy the books. I realize I don't have time to read the books. So then I subscribe to Audible, and I listen to Audible at 2x while I'm running to try to catch up on the book list they gave me. But that's all because actually they do understand what I'm interested in. And if we could do healthcare that well to get it to know what's going to work for you versus me versus someone else, that's really the dream of data science and behavioral science. And that's what I think we're combining.
Do those results kind of translate to hypertension as well? You mentioned a couple, like specifically around diabetes, so I'm curious if it's
They do. We have the best experience in diabetes because we've been at it for 5 years. But those results, we're seeing similar, very positive results in hypertension. And we're also seeing in behavioral health, we're starting to see as we enter that, an ability to say, what level do you need to be at? And so some people simply need an app that's available 24/7. And some people then say, okay, well, I have a unique issue. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, or I have an eating disorder, or I'm just depressed, or whatever it is. And now you scale to the next level. Okay, can we have a coach work with you? If that doesn't work, then the next level, maybe you need to go see someone. The problem with going to see someone is if you're feeling it at that moment, waiting till the next day to call someone to be told it's 2 weeks to get in to see him, or there's not even a specialist in your area, that alone is depressing. And then you're told that you have to pay a big copay to see him, and it's really expensive, and maybe they don't take your insurance. That whole system is broken. And so what we have to do is start by being available when you need us, and then make accessible the rest of the healthcare system.
Yeah, we're out of time almost, but I just want to finish with, so a year ago you gave up the CEO title to Zane. Now, what's next for you? Is it staying in this exec chairman role, or you got your eyes out on some other ventures?
Well, one of the, as I mentioned, we're blessed with an incredible management team, and convincing Zane to join us was, I think, one of the great things that I was able to do. He's an incredible executive and great leader, and had run a public company, Cerner, and grown it, and grown both the experience of their users, the technology, and their stock price all in one. So that was great. Because we're growing so fast, because we have so many opportunities, I was hoping that I could retire and ride off into the sunset, but it hasn't been that. So, probably 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for the foreseeable future. This is a big part of my focus. We have a venture fund as well, Seven Wire Ventures, and staying active in that. And there's some people who love to golf, and some people who have a variety of other things that they do. And I love to build companies. So whether it's in our venture fund, whether it's new initiatives we have at Livongo, the plan was never for me to go away. And in fact, Zane said he would only take the job if I agreed to stay, and we were going to work together on building the company. So that's the plan, and I don't see us changing it anytime soon.
Fair enough. You've also got that glass blowing studio, but that's a conversation for another day.
We do.
Okay.
Well, great.
Well, thank
Super.
you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking the time.